Have you ever looked around and wondered how some people manage to just completely break away from the pack, while others seem to coast along year after year doing the exact same thing with absolutely zero results? Well, welcome to today's Explainer, where we're diving into a fascinating breakdown of that exact phenomenon. We are exploring some incredible source material that maps out exactly how to escape the bare minimum and genuinely stand out in literally any company, course, or community you'll ever be a part of. Because it turns out there's a very specific psychology behind why we get stuck and a surprisingly straightforward method for breaking free. Seriously, why do some people stand out while others spend years just spinning their wheels? It is a super frustrating reality for a lot of professionals who just feel stuck in a rut. You put in the hours, you show up every day, but somehow the needle doesn't actually move. Okay, let's dive into this, because to answer this question, our source material categorizes the vast majority of people into 4 common stagnant groups. Recognizing these groups is absolutely crucial. It's the very first step. It is how we ensure we aren't unknowingly trapping ourselves in a cycle of stagnation. So let's start with group 1, the complainers. You've definitely met them. Or hey, if we're being completely honest with ourselves, you've probably even been one at some point. They always feel like something is inherently unfair. They blame a bad market, they blame impossible deadlines, or they insist the company just doesn't appreciate their true potential. And the fascinating insight here isn't that they're necessarily wrong. I mean, some of those complaints might be completely valid, right? The market can be brutal, and companies can definitely be flawed. But the harsh reality is that complaining changes absolutely nothing when you log back into work on Monday morning. It might feel super productive in the moment to vent, but it ultimately just keeps you frozen exactly where you are, waiting for the entire world to change instead of just changing your own approach. Then we have group 2, the watchers. These are the folks who read all the insightful posts, they nod enthusiastically along with the advice, and they habitually save videos to this massive digital graveyard of bookmarks that they are never, ever going to open again. This group is incredibly well-informed. They know exactly what they should be doing, and they could probably debate the best strategies with you all day long. But here's the catch. They confuse the dopamine hit of consuming information with taking actual, meaningful action. They feel like they're making progress just by gathering all these resources, but in reality, they remain completely stationary. Next up, we find group 3, the minimum-doers. This is an incredibly common and genuinely dangerous trap to fall into. These individuals do exactly enough not to get flagged by their managers, but never quite enough to actually get noticed for a promotion or a cool new opportunity. Their daily routine literally becomes a game of survival. They just log in, click through the required tasks, check the box, and clock out. And the real danger here is that it feels safe, but it's a strategy of mere survival, not growth. Over the span of a few years, it basically ensures you blend right into the background of your organization, completely forgettable when it comes time for leadership to hand out new, exciting responsibilities. And finally, we have group 4, the quick fixers. This group operates under the illusion that spending $10 and cramming for a single weekend is going to magically transform their entire career trajectory. They buy the absolute cheapest online course they can find, they skim through the material at 2 times speed, and then they wonder months later why absolutely nothing in their professional life has changed. It's the classic allure of the shortcut, but as our source brilliantly points out, $10 buys you a basic PDF of information or maybe a quick video tutorial, but it certainly does not buy you a brand new career. Deep expertise is never, ever born from a weekend crim session. So there they are, the complainers, the watchers, the minimum doers, and the quick fixers. It is totally worth asking yourself honestly right now, which pattern have you fallen into lately? We all drift into these groups at some point when we get tired, overwhelmed, or just burned out. But acknowledging it is the only way out. Because staying in any of these 4 groups literally guarantees you will remain exactly where you are today. You can't hack your way out of them, and you definitely can't complain your way out of them. You have to actively choose a different path. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it frames the massive contrast between that quick fixer mentality, cramming for one weekend, and a completely different, much more reliable approach, consistent extra time, money, and effort. This stark contrast introduces us to a much smaller, incredibly rare 5th group of people. These are the individuals who completely bypass all 4 of those stagnant traps. They aren't looking for a shortcut, and they definitely aren't waiting around for permission. They just execute on a very specific compounding strategy. This 5th group is defined by one beautifully simple concept from the source material, the extra. It literally just means doing a bit more than required, and crucially, repeating it again and again until it just becomes your standard identity. It is not a one-time heroic effort. The source highlights a really powerful truth here. People actually notice the extra. Managers notice it, your colleagues notice it. Even if you aren't actively trying to show off or be the loudest person in the room, that kind of quiet consistency stands out like a beacon, simply because doing more than the bare minimum is so incredibly rare in the modern workplace.
So let's break down exactly what building the extra habit looks like in practice, because it is not about burning yourself out. It's about targeted, deliberate investment. First, it means spending extra time on the parts of your job or studies that you don't quite understand yet, rather than just skipping over them or hoping someone else handles it. Second, it means investing extra money into your own education, like buying the comprehensive training instead of just that cheapest $10 quick fix. And third, it means putting in extra effort. That means staying focused and pushing forward after a really rough week instead of just coasting through to Friday afternoon. It's a triad of time, money, and effort applied consistently. To really bring this concept to life, our source provides a fascinating real-world case study. Let's look at Amin's journey. Amin's story perfectly illustrates the incredible trajectory of someone who transitions from struggling right into that rare fifth group we just defined. His path is deeply relatable, and it shows us exactly how the extra compounds over time when you actually commit to the process instead of just looking for the exit door.
Amin actually started out in a really rough spot. His first year of engineering school was, frankly, a total disaster. He went from having top high school grades to actually failing math and physics. That is the exact moment most people would join the complainers or just throw in the towel entirely. But instead, over the following weeks, he painstakingly rebuilt his study habits one by one and pulled his math grade all the way back to the top of the scale. And that same grit carried right into his career. He landed an apprenticeship in a test automation role, and instead of just doing the bare minimum, he used his free time to take an IT fundamentals course so he could truly understand how software gets built from the ground up. Over subsequent months, he completed a full DevOps bootcamp, and again, instead of stopping there like a minimum doer, he kept going, adding DevSecOps skills on top of the whole shebang. By his final year, all this extra effort paid off big time, and he moved into a permanent, highly coveted DevOps-focused role.
The source frames a success beautifully. He got there by choosing more than once to invest in the same direction. So the crucial point is that Amin didn't achieve this by just taking one course and calling it a day. He didn't rely on a $10 quick fix. He consistently chose to learn, practice, and learn some more. None of those single actions guaranteed his success on their own, but by stacking them together, this compounding habit put him in a completely different category than the apprentices who were just doing the bare minimum to keep their jobs. When the company had to decide who got the permanent role, the difference between Amin and everyone else was absolutely undeniable.
Which brings us to the core philosophy of our explainer today. Repetition is what actually moves you, not one big burst of effort. Think about that for a second. The bare minimum mentality relies on doing just enough for today. The quick fix mentality relies on one huge unsustainable burst of effort, like a weekend cram session, before completely fading away. But real, undeniable career movement comes from the quiet, unglamorous power of repeating good habits over and over until they are just part of who you are. It's not about being the absolute smartest person in the room. It's about being the most consistently invested. You absolutely do not need to overhaul your entire life overnight. That is a trap, and honestly, it usually leads right back to burnout. Instead, I want you to ask yourself, what is one thing you could do again this week? Think of something you did last week that moved the needle just a little bit in a positive direction. Maybe it was reading one chapter of a book or spending 20 extra minutes troubleshooting a tricky problem. Now commit to doing it again. Pick one extra thing to repeat and start your journey out of those stagnant groups and into that rare, smaller group of people who truly stand out. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope it sparks some amazing momentum in your week.